Now, breaking headlines from 50 to 250 years ago. This is yesterday's news.
Good day, America. How are you? I'm Peyton Dixon with Historic Experience, and this is yesterday's news. As always, full disclosure, this is a history channel, so these headlines are several yesterdays ago. Let's get to yesterday's news for April. April Fool's Day, 1865. The Battle of Five Forks, Virginia took place. Union Army Major General Philip Sheridan defeated Confederate forces led by Major General George Pickett, who was caught unawares because he was attending a shad bake that day, which explains why they were with Five Forks. The battle foreshadowed the end of the war when Sheridan's troops pinned the Confederate front and right flanks and left Pickett fenced in. April 2nd, 1513, Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon landed in current-day Florida, naming the land La Florida based on florido, meaning flowery, and claimed it for the Spanish crown. De Leon is believed to have landed at the site of present-day St. Augustine, the oldest city in the continental U.S. Some believe he ended up closer to Melbourne, though it's doubtful because I-95 is a mess along there. De Leon returned to Florida in 1521, ready to start a Spanish colony, though in his bravado he didn't count on the locals being unhappy with his arrival and driving him off in an attack that led to Spanish retreat. So to recap, Ponce de Leon came in overconfident, trying to do something that he probably shouldn't have done, and paid for it, making him the world's first Florida man. On April 24, 1800, President John Adams approved the appropriation of $5,000 for the purchase of, quote, such books as may be necessary for the use of Congress, unquote. This was the beginning of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., starting with a collection of 740 volumes and 3 maps. And on its opening day, this is interesting, Thomas Jefferson already had a late fine of $20. The man loved books. Alexander Hamilton would later assume Jefferson's fine because Hamilton believed it would improve his credit. That one's deep in the weeds. And now it's time for
Yesterday's news, birthdays in April.
April 3rd, 1783. American writer Washington Irving was born in New York City. Considered one of the earliest successful American writers, the success of his stories of New York under the pseudonym Diedrich Knickerbocker inspired subsequent authors Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, Edgar Allan Poe, and a halfway decent basketball team. April 4th, 1802. American social reformer Dorothea Dix was born in Hampton, Maine. She crusaded for humane conditions for those with mental illness, and during the Civil War she was superintendent of women nurses. Dix made sure that soldiers in the Union and Confederate armies were treated with equal care. She also made sure that nurses were unadorned, plainly dressed, older women, because younger nurses were being inappropriately treated by the soldiers. Said the soldiers, "So you're saying this is our fault?" Said Dix, "Yes. Yes, it is." Oh, and the doctors do it too, so there's blame to go around. Men, just so you know, we got centuries of apologizing to do. Just be ready. April 23rd, 1791. James Buchanan, the 15th U.S. President, was born in Cove Gap, Pennsylvania. In his self-imposed single term from 1857 to 1861, the bachelor president responded to the panic of 1857 with, quote, reform, not relief, unquote, took a very hands-off approach to slavery, and denied that states had the right to secede, and also denied that the federal government could stop them. Buchanan has often been called one of the least effective United States presidents, and his passive-aggressive approach deemed him the 19th century's Rocket Raccoon or Marie from Everybody Loves Raymond. On April 19, 1775, the British Army took on the Massachusetts militia in Lexington and then conquered Massachusetts, in what would be called the beginning of the American Revolution, or the shot heard round the world. Well, heard everywhere except the Congress. That is the Olive Branch petition, for those of you who can't see up close. The previous night, listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere and a few other people. Sorry, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. On April 18, 1775, to warn the townspeople of Lexington and Concord that the British Army was on its way, Joseph Warren sent Paul Revere and William Dawes westward from Boston. And those two met Samuel Prescott of Concord, and the 3 of them traveled successfully to Lexington. But on the way to Concord, Revere got arrested, Dawes was thrown from his horse, and Prescott made it back to his hometown to warn everyone. The moral of the story? Be sure to get a 19th century poet as your PR man. And that is just some of yesterday's news for April. Until we meet again, I'm Peyton Dixon of Historic Experience reminding you, don't repeat history. Leave that to the professionals.